Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today, we are doing 200 part 212 of Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We took a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. Actually, it's quite a awesome selection here. So we've got some returning animals, Monsoon, and a few other people that have been going through doing a few remasters and things. We've got Jay Quadix has made a few fishies, and we've got Great Case Mod also giving us a couple things. So I'll go through, of course, who made what and stuff, but we're going to talk about the animals first. So first up, we got Jay Quadix, who's made a couple really awesome little fishies. So we're going to be starting off with the Bluehead Wrasse today. So another really cool species. So let's have a look at these little goobers. So this one is the male. So this is called Thalassosoma biovacanum, also known as just the blue-headed wrasse or the blue-headed wrasse, kind of variations of that. These guys are a species of ray fish, marine one too, so type of wrasse in the family Laboridae. And they're native to coral reefs in the tropical waters of the Western Atlantic Ocean, with individuals being quite small, less than 110 millimeters or less than 11 centimeters, and really live longer than 2 years. And they're actually quite important as they form large schools and are quite important cleaner fish in these reefs. So their habitat is typically found in coral reefs of Antarctica, not Antarctica, the Atlantic Ocean, with their main range including the Caribbean Sea and the southeast area of the Gulf of Mexico. And they can be found quite commonly in the Dominican Republic as well. So it's a nice way to you can see them. So that's the male. We're going to look at the female over here. So the female, so the young or small females and males have yellow upper bodies with white lower bodies, often with green and black lateral striping down their sides, as you can see there, and occasionally dark vertical bands. This coloration is known as the initial phase, so this is kind of what they're born with. They can rapidly alter their presence or intensity of their yellow color, stripes, and bands, and their colors actually change to correspond to their behavior. Large females and some males will permanently change coloration and or sex and enter their terminal phase coloration, which has a blue head, black or white bars behind the head, and a green body. And this color phase is what gives this species its name. So the one that we're looking at before, I think that's a good example over there. Let's have a good look at there. So I think there's a male there. Yep, so this is the male phase. So it's quite an interesting animal there. We'll keep looking at you. I know there's one around here somewhere. Let's see if we can spot you. There we go. I want to have a look at the one swing around because it's more interesting, of course. So in terms of their diet, these guys focus or forage on zooplankton, mollusks, small crustaceans such as shrimp and krill, worms, other motile invertebrates, and the eggs of actually smaller fish, as well as ectoparasites on other fish. In initial phase, males will eat zooplankton from currents, and females in initial phase males have certain times that they'll hunt. So they are quite important, as we mentioned, cleaner fish in these ecosystems. So they are a common cleaner fish. They avoid cleaning piscivores, though, such as the spotted moray, the red hind, or the grayspie, as they will view them as prey, not just as little guys that'll clean them up. We'll have a look at another one because it's clearly not. We don't want to have a look at them on land. Let's see if we can spot a female. There's one over here. But yes, yeah, even though they can be spotted, they can be viewed as prey by some species. So that's why they won't clean them. So that's quite bad there. Other predators, though, there's also the ruffed-out stingray, the trumpet fish, the soapfish is another big predator for these guys. But yeah, they also do have a few different parasites that can actually render them infertile, which is a bit issue as well. In terms of the conservation status, though, they are widespread across the northwestern Atlantic region and are one of the most abundant species in some coral reefs around like Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the Netherlands Antilles. And they are less of least concern. However, this species does show high site fidelity, so if the local reef is damaged, the species is quite well impacted because they tend to hang around in those areas. But due to its quite bright coloration, they are sometimes actually collected for the aquarium trade, but this is not really a threat to the species. They are doing okay in most regards. So we'll see if we can find the male again, because I want to talk about one of the things that actually makes this species quite famous. No, he's on land. Let's see if we can actually get you to move. We might actually be able to get you to move. Let's see if we'll go in the water. Go in the water. Anyway, so like many other species of wrasse, these guys are progynous sequential hermaphrodites. So individuals may begin their life as either males or females, but females can change sex and later in life and become males. So that's really, really interesting. So I'll kind of explain a little bit more about that works. So their social system kind of exists within males. So there's terminal males, terminal phase males, which are most aggressive and the highest ranking. And then there's the initial phase males, which mate when they can get the chance in a larger group. The color changes indicate their role. So while terminal phased males chase initial phase males, their color changes to a metallic grey. When they're courting a female, they become pink or grey to like form black circles across their fins as well. So that's another really interesting thing about them. So one interesting thing as well is the sex change. So the initial phase males and initial phase females both change into terminal phase males. So this change can be quite quick, in around 8 days. However, this sex change is permanent though, so they can only change their sex once in their life. So if Josephine becomes Joseph, she can't go back into being Josephine. She has to stay a Joseph. Another one, as well as the terminal phase males, they kind of more just, get bigger. Experiment actually removing terminal phase males from our population showed that more females change into terminal phase males, so all those females turned into males, and turned into initial phase, terminal phase males. The initial males had comparatively larger testes than the terminal males because they, were born males. And this initial phase males actually produce more sperm compared to terminal phase males. Initial phase males actually achieve fertilization through participating in group spawns, and they do also have guarded harems. These groups consist of about 20 to 50 or more initial phase males that congregate in specific sites during a daily spawning period on medium to large sized reefs. So females using their groups to spawn and release eggs in kind of a spawning rush. And this maximizes their potential of fertilizing the eggs, and releasing a large number of sperm actually increases the pollability, and this actually kind of helps the explain why they have large testes in initial phase males. And this kind of competition is referred to as sperm competition, and this happens in a lot of species actually, even like species that aren't related to each other. So in terms of looking into their biology, actually their close relative as well, the saddle wrasse, have become quite important models to understand both the physiology and the neurobiology of this change and all the different hormones and stuff that goes into that, so that's quite important. And they do have some pretty interesting mating systems. So large terminal phase males, so ones that were born males, will defend breeding sites in which females migrate to daily. And the study was done to estimate the relative roles of each sex in choosing such locations of the sites. And all terminal phase males and all females were replaced in local isolated populations after the females were replaced. So the females were replaced, and after they were, half of the old sites were lost, and the same number of new sites came into use. So that's quite interesting as well. Let's see if we can spot the other one having a swim. No, he's just chilling there. Let's look at the females and. So it seems, and they actually continue to be code after a year after these manipulations. So this occurs although large males originally continue to defend and display, but the female actually choose the sites and the males will just defend them. They do not really have distinct territories though, and their populations roam freely. Also, as females, you do not really leave their original spawning site. The males are known to be taken away or leave. A plausible reason for this, why the females stay, could be they're more accustomed to these areas, but also because the predator threat is constant. Most of the literature on mating systems for blue-headed wrasse was described as small patches of reef, and a large linear barrier reef in St. Consue's Virgin Islands. Very large aggregations of group mating forms daily in a single area in the fore side of the reef. and tagging studies have showed that these fish are generally faithful to these particular feeding schools associated throughout the fall reef, and they tend to migrate to spawning grounds over 1.5 kilometers away, so quite a big distance. There is no mating, and that appears to happen in other upcurrent areas in the fall reef, but despite large differences in time spent in these migrations, there's actually no significant difference in fecundity and frequency of spawning among females that live at different distances from the mating aggregation. And the higher growth rate corresponds to a higher general feeding rate locomotion, suggests that the food intake may actually overweigh that kind of migration. So that's quite cool. Really, really cool little species, and my J Quadix, nice to talk about these cute little guys. So next up, we're going to be talking about another cool fish. We've got next up the conspicuous angelfish, done by J Quadix, another J Quadix mod. So let's have a look at these guys. So the J Quadix made this cool guy. In terms of the angelfish, they are an angelfish. They are in the family Acheronthoriformes, which is a type of sturgeon fish, and the Polychamethidae is the family, is the angelfishes. The entomology, their genus name Chelodopus means hair, teeth, crossing, so it's quite everything as well. In terms of their environment, what they found in, they are marine fish. They're typically found in reefs and considered non-migratory, so you won't often find them in huge, doing large migrations. They tend to hang around a certain place. And they tend to live in depths up between 1 to 40 meters and are considered temperate, so they don't live in the warmest waters, but they don't live in the coolest waters either. So temperate kind of is a good way to describe them. They live in the Western Pacific, so they're found in the southern Great Barrier Reef in Australia and New Caledonia, southwards to Lord Howe Island as well. So quite a wide range there. So very, very interesting. There's a male. Let's have a look at the female. So the male and the female are pretty much the same. In terms of size and weight and age, the maximum length is about 10 centimeters or 100 millimeters total length, so that's from their body as well. Inserted in their description, they do have total 13 dorsal spines and 18 soft rays. They have 3 anal spines and 18 soft rays. They are blue-grey on the upper half of the body, brownish to blackish on the ventral half or the bottom side. Operculum and basal part of the pectoral and caudal fins are yellow. So let's see if we can spot the other one swimming over there. You can see it probably much better on this one here. So you can see that bits of yellow there. Ellipse, pelvic fins are whitish or lightest blue, and the eye has a blue ring, and the margin of the periwinkle and auricle are both blue. So you can see that's blue there and blue there. Body shape, as you can see, is quite short and deep. They got quite a compressed body as well. Very, very tall fish, as you could say. So in terms of their biology, they generally live in deep coral reef areas, and juveniles can live as shallow as 1 meter deep. They feed, like other angelfish, on sponges and tourniquets, and they form pairs, so they're really exported for the wild aquarium trade, so they're not too impacted by those. They are considered least concerns. They are considered doing quite well, and they are considered harmless to humans. So they are, you're not going to hurt yourself, dealing with these guys. And the fisheries, they are kind of hunted commercially a little bit, but mostly for the aquarium trade. But that doesn't really impact them because they're not a popular fish in that regard. But still really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. So it's another J Quadix mod. So we're going to move on to the next one. We've got a remake by Monsoon. I do love a Monsoon mod. So here we have got the giant mudjack, or the large antlered mudjack. So these are quite a rare species. So these guys, their scientific name is Munotanus verconiensis. So they're often referred to as the large antlered mudjack. So these guys are the largest species known, and they were discovered in 1994 in the Vientiane Quang Hantu province of Vietnam and in central Laos. During the induction of the Nakai Reservoir in Laos, 38 of them were actually captured and studied and then released into the adjacent Nakai Nam Thero National Protected Area. Its subsequent radio tracking actually showed that these were rather successful, so these relocations were successful. And the species is also located in parts of eastern Cambodia as well as the Annamite Mountains. So these guys, in terms of the habitat, they're commonly found in evergreen forests and weigh between 66 and 110 pounds, between 30 to 50 kilograms. And you can see they have a red-brown coat, and they are an even-toed ungulate, so they got 2 or 4 toes. You see that's mainly the 2 there. And they are related to other mojags and deer and stuff like that. Due to slash and burn agriculture and hunting as well, they are considered sadly critically endangered. And they are also prey for animals such as leopards and tigers. And their closest relative is the common mojang, which is kind of ironic. There you can see that's the male there. Looks really, really cool. Monsoon has definitely been going through recently and remastering some of their old stuff. Nice to see some of these nice ones. Some of them haven't got quite a remaster, just some touch-ups. But this one has got a serious touch-up, so I thought it was worth including. And a couple others will in the past, so I'm quite keen to show them off. Here we've got the female here. Really, really pretty girl. And then we've got here the baby. There's your baby. Very cute little baby. Very, very cool. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, we have got Kanu, who has made the Indian grey mongoose as part of their little India pack. So let's have a look at these little ghoulies. So the Indian grey mongoose, or the Asian grey mongoose, or Urva edgeworthi, these guys are a species of mongoose native to the Indian subcontinent and Western Asia. And they are also considered least concerned by the IUCN. The grey mongoose inhabits open scrublands and forests and cultivated areas, often quite close to habitat and human habitation as well. In terms of their scientific name, they were originally proposed as Encanurum edgeworthi, and that was their name proposed by Anton Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire in 1817. Then it was put in the genus Herbestes, but all Asian mongooses are now considered in the genus Urva. So in terms of its coloration, you can kind of see there, it's very interesting colours. They have a tawny grey or iron grey fur, which is mostly grizzled and with stiffer and coarser hair than compared to that of other mongooses. The ruddiness of its coat varies among different subspecies, but appears to be more grey than most other species of mongoose, hence the name. The grizzled appearance does come from the individual hairs being ringed by creamy white and black, and their legs are brown and darker than in the body. The hair along the muzzle and eyes is also brown, as you can kind of see there. So you can see there, is he sleeping? Looks very, very cute. We'll actually have a look at another one, I think. Let's have a look at you, because you're wandering around, skulking around, being a little menace. The hair around the muzzle is also brown with a strongly rusty red coloration, as you can kind of see there. Their tail is quite bushy, and whilst the tip of the tail is actually coloured, is often pale yellow or white. So in terms of their body length, their tail length equates to their body length. So their body length is about 36 to 45 centimeters, or 14 to 17 inches. Tail length is about the same, and they weigh between 0.9 to 1.7 kilograms, or about 2 to 4 pounds, with males being typically quite larger than females. And they're actually really unusual as well, as they can discriminate between 4 colors, which is more than most other mammal species. So they've got really good color vision. So the Indian mongoose is generally accepted that it's been found in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. And the study in 2007 also found some from Turkey and the United Arab Emirates and extended their range. And despite actually being quite a common animal, there's not that much known about them. And the natural history of their mongoose the Indian mongoose is not actually considered quite well known. They appear to occupy a wide variety of habitats, though. So they tend to but they prefer open habitats. They'll live in grasslands, open areas, rocky patches, scrubs, semi-desert, cultivated fields, other disturbed areas as well. Areas of thickets, vegetation that's quite bushy, dry secondary forest, thorn forest, forest edges, and often near human settlement. And although they've been described as less dependent on human settlements, observations in India and heavy forested areas shows that they're more common around human settlements compared to and often scavenging on the human waste, as in all the stuff that we leave behind. In terms of their ecology and behavior, they are omnivorous, though most of its diet does make up of live prey, as it is an opportunistic hunter and will feed on mice, rats, lizards, snakes, and beetles, making up the bulk of their diet. Also eaten will be ground birds, their eggs, grasshoppers, scorpions, centipedes, frogs, crabs, fish, and plants of plants that include fruits, berries, and roots, as well as larger prey, even sometimes being taken like hares or egrets. And they kill prey by delivering a bite at the neck or back. So this species is also quite well known as well. Mongooses in general is known to combat venomous snakes. So they primarily achieve this by tiring out the snake, enticing it to make multiple strikes while it kind of acrobatically avoids them, jumps out the way and duck and dives. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee kind of thing. Secondary poison or protection against the venomous bite includes their quite stiff, rigid hair, which is hard for them to bite through, and also it's got thick, loose skin, which makes it harder to bite through as well. But one thing is also they have specialized ethylochlorine receptors, which makes them either resistant or completely immune to snake venom. And when dealing with scorpions, no measure is taken to disable the sting, and they just deal with them the same way they deal with snakes, which is quite interesting. So the Indian mongoose typically opens eggs by holding them in their paws and biting a hole in them in the little end. Smaller mongooses typically open eggs by throwing them between their legs or against a hard object, or so it has been speculated that the adults will do the same with large eggs. The Indian grey mongoose itself mates about 2 to 3 times a year. So we'll have a look at the cute little babies. I love talking about the cute little babies. Is that one, the cute little baby there? That is a very cute little baby there. They mate 2 to 3 times a year between March and October. The gestation period is about 60 to 65 days, and the female will give birth to 2 to 4 offspring. In the wild, they could live up to 7 years, but in captivity, they can live up to 12 in captivity. So in terms of their relationship with humans, they're often kept as pets to keep dwellings free from rats and other pests. So they are quite, people do benefit from having them around. And they're considered the state animal of Charnagara. And they are protected in India, but there is an illegal trade because their hair is quite good for making painting brushes and shaving brushes. And there's actually one of the biggest threats to the species. And about 3,000 mongooses were killed to produce 155 kilos of raw mongoose hair, which was seized in 2018. So that's quite interesting as well. And Rikki Tikki Tavi was actually a short story by Richard Kipling, or Rudyard Kipling, who actually was about the adventures of a little Indian grey mongoose. So that's quite cute. With a really, really cool animal here. So next up, this was done by Kanu. Kanu has been working a lot of Indian animals. It's nice to get India getting some love. But next up, we got by Crazy Tanga, who has actually gone and done something a bit different. They've made a species that's already been made a couple of times before, but they did a really good job at reconstructing the Sri Lankan elephant. So let's have a look at these guys, because these guys are wandering around. So this is the Sri Lankan elephant. I'm going to go a little bit into the history and things and what makes them different from other species, subspecies of elephant. So the Sri Lankan elephant is native to Sri Lanka, and is actually one of the 3 recognized subspecies of the Indian elephant, or the Asian elephant. It's considered a type because it was first described by Carl Linnaeus as Elephas maximus, so it's Elephas maximus maximus, which is considered the dominant subspecies. So in terms of its characteristics, they are the largest subspecies or population. I actually don't think the Sri Lankan elephant personally should be considered a subspecies, because genetically it seems to be a hodgepodge of all sorts of different populations, because people used to bring them there, and they've only been separated from the mainland of India for about 500 years. It's not nearly enough time for an animal that, especially, it'd only be a couple dozen generations separated from the Indian elephant. But anyway, the Sri Lankan elephant is considered the largest subspecies and is between 2 and 3.5 meters tall, or 6'7" to 11'6", and weighs between 2,000 and 5,500 kilograms, or between 4,400 and 12,100 pounds. They have 19 pairs of ribs, so that's another weird thing that they have, so they've got an extra pair of ribs. Their skin is darker in colour than Indicus or Sumatricus. Samarius, or you say that, with larger and more distinct patches of depigmentation, as you can see on their kind of faces there, and their ears, also their ears, face, trunk, and belly. And females are actually usually smaller than males, and 90% of tuskless males are called machina, and only 7% of males actually bear tusks. And they typically will grow to about 1.8 meters or 6 feet in length. So we'll have a look at the male there. So he hasn't got the most impressive tusks, but he's still got some nice tusks. They grow up to average about 1.8 meters or 6 feet in length, and weigh up to 35 kilograms. And there was one individual called Meligorna Raja who has the longest tusks ever recorded. That was 7'6", or about just over 2.2 meters. The Sri Lankan subspecies is weakly supported by analysis of allosome loci, but is not by analysis of mitochondrial DNA. In terms of its habitat, they used to be they are now restricted mostly in the lowlands of the dry zone, where they are still fairly widespread in north, south, east, northwest, and north central and sometimes parts of Sri Lanka, with some small populations hidden here or there. But for the most part, they are kind of doing their own thing. Obviously, they used to live all across Sri Lanka, but during the colonial period, they were actually destroyed a lot of their habitat and hunted the elephants for sport. So it's estimated about 6,000 elephants under colonial rule were actually shot by elephants during the colonial rule of the British Empire. But at the moment, the population estimated, the most recent estimates of these elephants is considered to be about 7,500. So they are considered a little bit at risk, so that's a bit of a worry. We'll have a look at him when he's not sleeping anymore. We'll have a look at the cute little baby, look at the cute little baby. Make it more positive. So in terms of their ecology behaviour, they're not too different from other species of elephants. The large mega herbivores, they eat a lot of plants and things like that. They do prefer actually grasses, especially when they're younger. They are quite important for regenerating forests, so all the stuff that they poop out, they goes out and sprouts in their poo and becomes the rest of the forest. And they do live in small, loosely associated social groups similar to African bush elephants, and they manage to communicate with each other using acoustic, visual, and chemical signals, and also using ultrasound and infrasonic calls to talk to each other. Let's have a look at the male again, because he's rather beautiful and a great example of his species. In terms of their threats, a lot of the threats are very similar to other Asian elephant subspecies, but there are some specific ones. So the Sri Lankan Civil War was a big thing for these guys. Sri Lankan elephants were often maimed or killed by landmines. And during 1990 to 1994, an estimated 261 wild elephants died either as a result of gunshot injuries, killed by poachers, or by landmines. And a lot of them were actually crippled because, they step on a landmine and their, leg explodes. Poaching for ivory is actually not that major threat, considering tuskers are actually quite rare. So, they haven't got many tusks to actually poach. Though some ivory trade does go on, with human population growth and demand for land being much greater threat, as these guys will often, raid crops and things like that, and being such large and, destructive animals, they do get into conflict with humans. And it was considered between 1999 and the end of 2006, nearly 100 wild elephants were killed to protect crops and houses. During droughts, they often will damage agricultural land to find food. Nearly 80 elephants were killed in northwestern Sri Lanka, and leading in 2006 there was 160 elephant deaths. And they have the highest elephant mortality rate in the world, which is quite sad. And even in 2022, they killed 439 elephants. But luckily, there is some conservation work to help them. There's different sanctuaries that have taken injured elephants and orphaned elephants. They're also trying to manage them to try and create a wide population and support protected areas and land that can support elephants and not restrict them. But yeah, the Sri Lankan elephant in particular is actually quite important culturally. So they were quite a common elephant in Sinhalese and Sri Lankan Tamils hereditary for over 2,000 years, and they were the coat of arms and the flag of the Ceylon government between 1875 and 1948, which includes the elephant and even some that it wears today. And they are considered quite important, and there are many large Buddhist or Hindu temples in Sri Lanka has their own elephants. And since time, these elephants have been domesticated. They were used for work, for logging and big jobs like that. But also they were used for war. And they were exported from the island and exported to the island for hundreds of years in the Portuguese and Dutch colonial era. And the British did not export elephants, but they took to hunting wild elephants. And the capture of wild for domestication of work elephants continued. So they liked to hunt them and catch them to work. Domestic elephants. A census of domestic elephant population in 1970 suggests there was about 532 among 378 owners, but that had dropped quite a bit. Domesticated elephants were mainly used for cultural pageants, the chief of which was the annual Kara Eshe Parada in recent years, and this has potentially dropped quite a bit further. However, they do still use elephants in areas where the terrain is inaccessible for logging and are used for tourism as well. Ownership of elephants is considered to be highly prestigious, and calls have been made to the mission to capture wild elephants or rescue orphan wild elephants in government care to be given to temples to be planted in these pageants. Or captive breeding and private ownership does not take place because they are, they take a long time to breed. They are pregnant for 2 years after all. Even modern zoos are struggling to breed elephants. They're only really starting to get the hang of it, so you'd think, they would be struggling with it too. And there have been actually legal reforms to help, with elephants, as well as the captive elephant population was actually introduced in 2021. And there's a landmark case into dozens of calves actually been stolen from herds in a 10-year period. So they actually dropped the charges as well and releasing the elephants to their fauna owners. So you've got to be very careful with that. We don't want to steal elephants anymore. And there slowly has been, but I think using like rescues, I think that'd be a good way to do it. And how can you steal such a cute little face away from his mum? It's very, very sad. But anyway, we are going to carry on. We're going to keep on keeping on. So next up, we got Great Cakes, who's done both of these mods. So we've got a couple extinct animals today, some extinct subspecies. So here we have got the cave leopard, or the he's got no water. Let me just quickly put some water in their enclosure. Don't want them dehydrated now. That's not good. So we'll let them drink and do their own thing. But they're all coming down to to have a drink. So let them. Yeah, this is the cave leopard. You can see it's quite a cool reconstruction. It is considered a subspecies, so it's not too different, but it's also a little bit fluffier. So the European leopard, they actually have quite a long history in Europe. We think of them being as African and Asian, but they do have a history in Europe. So the leopards used to live, they lived in Europe from the early to middle Pleistocene transition, so between 1.2 to 0.6 million years ago, until the end of the late Pleistocene in about 12,000 years ago, and even into the early Holocene potentially. Oh, that's quite cute. Remains of leopards have also been found in Europe from the Iberian Peninsula to the Caucasus, so they have been living in Europe for a long while now, and only just recently kind of went extinct there. So in terms of this population, the proposed late Pleistocene European leopard subspecies is considered Panthera pandus splaya. So splaya just means cave because you have, Ursus splaya, which is the cave bear, and you have the cave hyena. A lot of them have splaya in their name. Several bones from the early to middle to late Pleistocene were described and were considered different subspecies, but mitochondrial DNA looking at them suggests that from about 40,000 years ago, it suggests they kind of all had common lineage from living Asian leopards from about 500,000 years ago, which actually led these authors of the study to propose that these guys are considered their own distinct population from these Asian leopards. However, later evidence actually suggests from two genomes coming from a cave in Spain found that they are each other's closest relative, and they did not group with those from Germany, and were instead within the living diversity of Asian leopards, and in particular shared common ancestry with a 35,000-year-old mitochondrial sequence obtained in the Mesomarca cave in the northern Caucasus. So they may have just been a population kind of within the Asian leopards, and they kind of local population went extinct. I'm not sure, subspecies or stuff like that. That it may not be true, but they are nestled within that, so they may be their own subspecies still, but they're not a distinct from Asian leopards. They are within different Asian leopard subspecies, you could probably say. In terms of their description, these guys have medium long hair, and the characteristics actually closest to Panthera pandus tuluá, which is now considered the Persian or Anatolian leopard, which makes sense. They live in the most similar habitat. An apparent description of the leopard actually exists in Chalvot Cave, which was actually a painting done by Paleolithic people. Shows that they had a colour pattern similar to modern leopards, but with an unspotted, presumably white belly, as you can kind of see reconstructed in this one here. So you can see that white belly with the long hair. That's kind of what the cave leopard would have looked like. Like other mammals, leopards from the cold glacial periods of late Pleistocene are usually larger than their warm interglacial phases, and with modern leopards there is a strong sexual dimorphism. So this is a male, I believe. The female is in here as well. And why did I zoom out so far? That was wow. That was a lot. But anyway, we'll have a look at the female over here, who's actually a melanistic. So you get to see there is a melanistic variant for this one. So obviously the males are often quite a bit larger than females, as in modern leopards. And it's cool that we have Paleolithic art of these guys, so we do know a little bit about what they look like. So in terms of remains, they actually show quite a large amount of size variation, but generally they are larger. And you imagine these interglacials, they would have been, larger, because the Bergmann's rule, typically in colder areas and higher latitudes or higher elevations, because it's colder, they'll be bigger to conserve body heat. Remains suggest they were, but generally large compared to modern leopards. So they were, there was some variation, but in general they were quite large compared to modern leopards. And the muzzles from the skulls are generally shorter than those of living leopards. And they also argued that middle Pleistocene European leopards actually was distinguished from late Pleistocene, but no trend really does exist, it seems. In terms of their distribution and chronology, the exact arrival of these leopards in Europe is kind of disputed. Some authors have pointed that in Europe during late Pleistocene about 1.2 to 1.1 million years ago, but it's suggested as around early middle Pleistocene about 600,000 years ago. While initially very rare, leopards and records of leopards have become more common and widely distributed in the late middle Pleistocene following the extinction of Panthera gobernensis, which we covered before, the European jaguar. Though the fossil record in Europe was still quite scarce overall. Northwards, the leopard range into Great Britain, but the records here are rare and only recorded during the marine isotope stage 7, or about 225,000 years ago. But during the late Pleistocene, the northern limit was about Germany, in northern Berlin. Though during the last glacial maximum, they persisted in relatively tropical areas such as Iberia, Italian, and the Balkan peninsulas, and fragments have been found in Switzerland, Italy, Germany, Spain, Poland, and Greece, with leopard fossils dating from 43,000 years ago being found in Poland. The most complete skeleton is found in Vienna Cave in southern Bosnia and Herzegovina, with 4 leopard fossils being found. These are dated to the end of the late Pleistocene, about 29,000 to 37,000 years ago, and the cave painting we mentioned is dated between 25,000 and 34,000 years ago. And the last leopards seem to have vanished about 24,000 years ago from Europe, and that would have been just before the large glacial maximum, because they're more of a temperate species. They probably couldn't cope with Europe chilling. The site itself in Edqui is actually from the last glacial period, about 53,000 years ago, and actually consists of a rich concentration of leopard remains in Pleistocene Europe, with over 200 bones of leopards being found, including 5 actually quite well-preserved skulls. And the remains of cubs in the cave actually suggested that the leopards used these caves to give birth and have little cubs, as we'll have a look at the little cubs over here, as they are quite cute. The youngest reliable leopards records for leopards outside of Eastern Europe are from the Iberian Peninsula, from between 17,000 to 11,000 years ago, with records of the Iberian Peninsula possibly being into the early Holocene, into the Mesolithic, with modern Asian-type leopards being actually still found in Europe and the Northern Caucasus. As we mentioned, the Persian or Anatolian leopard is also found there to this day, even though they are quite rare. In terms of the paleobiology, though, the fossils of these leopards are sometimes found in caves, as they seem to have used these caves, like other species, seem to have used them to find shelter or hide their prey, since there probably weren't quite as many trees. They generally preferred smaller caves, because most likely large caves would have been used by cave lions, cave bears, or humans, so they kind of, use these smaller caves. In European Ice Age caves, leopard bones are actually far rarer than those of lions, and all currently known fossils belong to adults, suggesting if they really, if ever, raise their cubs in caves. So they may have been more similar to typical leopards, raising them in trees and climbing into trees to hide prey, and not to avoid coming into these caves and dealing with cave bears and cave lions, which are much bigger than them and could easily kill them. Where leopard remains are typically found in larger caves, they're found in more deep recesses as well, so they're found in much deeper parts of the cave. And it's not precisely known what species these cave leopards would have hunted, but they would likely have preyed upon prey very similar to modern snow leopards, such as ibex, deer, and wild boar. And it's likely these guys may have occasionally scavenged or killed cave bears during hibernation. And during the cold phases, European leopards lived mainly in mountain or alpine boreal forests, or in mountains above the tree line, and were usually not found on the mammoth steppes. So they either preferred mountains or areas with a lot of places for them to climb, because they don't do leopards in general don't do well in super open areas. Like you won't find them on really savannas. They like kind of woodlands and stuff like that in general. I mean, you will find them on the savannah, but with lots of trees. They like areas with trees so they can climb and get away from bigger predators. And yeah, the mammoth steppe didn't really provide that, so they would be found in open boreal forests in the mountains, or just even in the mountains, because there's still a lot to cover and places for them to climb in the mountains as well. So that's kind of what they need. But yeah, really really cool. Another Great Cakes mod. Great big fan of this one. So let's have a look at the male. Oh, that's not what we want to have a look. So yeah, this is not really too different from your modern leopard, just a kind of, Ice Age version of a modern species. So it's cool to have this covered and gives you a bit of variety because, there's a lot of cool leopards. And it's cool that Great Cakes mod has taken the time to do some really interesting things. And it's cool to have an Ice Age leopard, with the extra fur and a bit bigger and really fits the vibes. But anyway, we've got another extinct subspecies of another big cat. So this is the jaguar. So this is considered the giant jaguar. So let's have a look at you. Is this the male? Yep. Let's see if he's a big male. 35%. So this is the giant jaguar, or its official name is Panthera onca augusta. So these guys are an extinct subspecies of jaguar that was endemic to North America and lived during the middle to late Pleistocene. So in terms of their description, they were about 15 to 20% larger than modern jaguars, and also had longer limbs. But during the Ingratonian, these guys were on average about 105 kilograms, with the largest 233 pounds, with the largest individuals being 129 kilograms or 284 pounds. So that's quite a bit bigger than a modern jaguar, up to the size, like a female lion. But they did go through a downsize during the Rachelabrian, with populations being smaller than the populations. Sometimes population trends, they get bigger and smaller, but they were still on average bigger than your modern South American jaguar. So in terms of their history, although Panthera onca still actually resided in the southern US in several native tales, possibly about this subspecies exists, the first published remains of the Panthera onca augusta, or the giant jaguar, was described in 1872. The fossils were found by Ferdinand Vadier Hayden on the Palette River, Nebraska, and were sent by Joseph Leddy to the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, who named them originally as Felis angustans in 1872, and there was just a premolar and maxilla fragment, and was thought actually to belong, and the humerus as well, was thought to belong to either an American lion, Panthera atrox, or Smilodon fatalis, and also they mistakenly thought they belonged to a Pliocene animal, but they actually came from the Pleistocene. Later in 1919, Oliver Perry Hay actually described a left canine in Velo, Florida, and named it Felis veneris, which is now seen as a synonym of Augusta, Panthera onca augusta. In 1929, there were several teeth found of this one, and also concluded that all material was referred to Augusta because they were pretty much looked pretty much the same. And the mandible was actually notably one of the first complete ones found for the taxon. And yet another discovery came in 1938 with a discovery of two partial fragmentary postcranial skeletons, actually, of Augusta that came from Cumberland Cave in Maryland that were intermingled with that of a puma. So there was basically two jaguars and a puma. The most kind of productive discoveries outside of California came in 1939 and 1944, with the discoveries of footprints and several fossils in Craighead Caverns in Tennessee the former year. And there was actually a few more, well preserved skeletons in Tennessee, and that actually showed their clear differences that they had between the other, the modern types of jaguar. Additional fossils have also been found in the La Brea tar pits and also Oregon, and they're actually frequently found in Florida, which seems to be quite a nice site for them. They've also been found in Mexico as well. An fossil specimen has been found in Georgia, and it's looking at its genome or its mitogenomic analysis actually suggests that the specimen certainly belongs to Panthera onca, but its subspecific assignment remains unresolved. So yeah, it is kind of a very interesting one. So you can see it there. So most differences, it's basically just the American jaguar subspecies, not too different, just a bit larger and a little bit more leggy. May have lived in more open habitats as well. And we do have your modern type jaguar actually used to live potentially in the 1700s, lived pretty much all across the US. So that's quite interesting as well. We'll actually have a quick look at the Zoopedia. I hope it doesn't crash on me. The last time I tried this, it crashed on me. But yeah, it's fine. So yeah, not too much different. Let's see what else we can find. Legs were 6% longer, and the 4 feet height were about 9 feet longer than jaguars today. So it's not a big difference. A very new discovery was made in the early 19th. It's believed that this ancient cat was much larger than the jaguars of today, as the remains were found norther than the extant jaguar populations. That's farther from the equator, so that's Bergman's rule. And although P. onca still resides in the southern United States, and we kind of mentioned that one before, and they've got no species they like to live with. And we'll have a look at the cute little babies, because yeah, cute little jaguar. Nice to cover cute little species like this. Definitely a big fan. Alright, so we'll have a look at the male for a little bit more. Where is he gone? Where is he? There he is. So this is the giant jaguar. It's really cool to have some of these animals represented. Flesh out, your Ice Age parks, and especially if you want to do like a park where you de-extinct a lot of things. Cool to have something like the giant jaguar. Yeah, really, really cool. Anyway, let's move out. So yeah, I'm going to thank everyone. So yeah, thank you very much for all your lovely models. Thank you, Jaquatics, for those fishes. Really, really cool. Thank you, Monsoon, for remastering that Mojang. Thank you, Kanu, for your mongoose. And thank you, Crazy Tanga, for your Sri Lankan elephant. Really cool to get some more elephants. And of course, Great Cake Mods. There isn't really one that you can't have a mod spotlight without a couple Great Cakes mods. And thank you for doing a really good job at reconstructing those prehistoric subspecies. It's really cool to see them get some love because they're not too different, but they're different enough that they're definitely worth their own thing and really create some variation for the game. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.